Welcome back, everyone. Today's guest is Sam Whale. Sam is co-founder and managing director of Unforgiving Minute, a leadership development consultancy focused on providing great development that creates real change, if that's what people want. Over the past 10 years, Sam and the team have partnered with organisations such as the Football Association, Godolphin, Shell, Selfridges, Whitbread, Lambeth Council, Trafford Housing Trust, Sport England and Southampton FC. Sam has a history of shaping the UK sports system in its golden era. In 2008, Sam joined UK sports coaching team ahead of Beijing. The following 6 years would be life-changing for him, working alongside some of the best coaches in the UK with an unrelenting focus on delivering medal success in London 2012 and beyond. Sam led the Elite Coach Programme, the World Class Performance Conference, and the Mentor Development Initiative, all to support the succession of people in the high-performance system, from coaches to performance directors, CEOs, and NGB boards. Beyond Unforgiving Minute, Sam is a non-executive director for Wheelchair Basketball, and he chairs their performance committee. He lives in Brighton with his partner Eric and takes every opportunity to travel to new places. I love this conversation, and I'm sure you will too. Welcome, Sam, to the Excitable Soul podcast. Wonderful to have you with us today. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Thanks, James. It's good to be with you, and thanks ever so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, my genuine pleasure. As you can imagine, I've been excited for this conversation. We had the almost rare opportunity of kind of being together earlier on in the week, and so it feels like a real treat to be with you twice, and now to be able to share a conversation with a whole bunch of others as well is absolutely amazing. So we always start in the Excitable Soul with really just getting people to think about where and how they uncovered a sense of purpose for them. What are some of the experiences that shaped who they are in the world? And I'm just wondering if there are any that immediately spring to mind for you.
Yeah, it's nice to be bookending my week with you, and thanks for the warm-up conversation on Monday. James, it's always lovely just to spend some time with you and have a conversation. So I'm really delighted to kind of dig into this. And true to form, you've kind of posed some fairly hefty questions, which is definitely making me think. I guess in answer to your first question, like I suspect for many people, what are the experiences that really have impacted you or shaped you or has directed you in terms of your sense of purpose? I think they tend to be kind of early on experiences in life predominantly. And so when I reflect on that question, I think about my upbringing. I think about kind of what was going on for me as I was kind of learning a sense of self-identity and who I was and learning about the world. And so for me, kind of growing up in a very rural existence, growing up in the middle of Wales on a very large hill, about 1,500 feet above sea level, surrounded by largely nothing, which has its kind of pros and cons, right? So in so many ways, it kind of gives you time and space to get used to being on your own or with just a very small amount of people. And I think that kind of existence growing up until I was, I guess, 18, going off to university, in some ways was quite a protective existence and quite a privileged existence. But I think what it gave me was a sense of a kind of freedom, of independence, of being comfortable in my own company. Because I didn't have all the kind of the stimulation around me of kind of living in a village or a town or a city. And on the other hand, when I reflect on that, I didn't have all of that other stuff that kind of lots of people grow up with. So I think it took me a while to kind of catch up with other parts of life in some ways. But I think living a bit of a rural existence is a kind of a key element to shaping kind of who I am and what's important to me.
And I'm curious that kind of there's almost like a tension or what feels a bit like a paradox, really, in that you describe that kind of sense of wide open space and use the word protection. Actually, it's quite protected environment, and I can imagine that there are people listening going, "Dear God, that's frightening!" Like being alone in that way. and
yeah,
B, having that much space, like,
yeah, yeah,
how do you
yeah,
cope
yeah,
with that?
yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering, with the power of hindsight, on being able to kind of reflect, how did that shape your ability to take that transition into university and experience a different life, and how does it continue to shape who you are today?
Yeah, to be honest, I think it didn't prepare me for
Yeah,
the rest of life that followed, um, at all.
yeah,
Um, but what it gave me was a sense of appreciation for um, not only the kind of some of the practical stuff around kind of nature and the world around us, but it also gave me an appreciation because I was kind of growing up um, kind of on a farm or
yeah,
surrounded by farmland, and therefore, a big part of my upbringing in childhood was I guess that the kind of the sport that I did for a big part of my life, which was riding horses,
yeah,
training and riding horses, and with that comes huge responsibility.
yeah, yeah,
So from a very young age, I guess I was taught the importance of responsibility,
yeah,
of others, and others being kind of, not just the people that were around us, our friends and family, but responsibility to kind of look after and maintain kind of animals, in this case kind of horses, which take up a lot of time.
yeah,
So I think that sense of kind of growing up kind of on a farm where you kind of chipped in.
yeah,
You didn't really have a choice about whether or not you got involved. You got involved,
yeah,
and so that kind of ingraining of hard work and um, selflessness in some ways,
yes, yeah, yeah,
doing things for others and
yeah,
playing your part in the
mm,
in the kind of the group, in the team, which was kind of the family unit, and kind of getting on with it, and not complaining, kind of making stuff happen and doing your part. So I think it shapes certainly not only a kind of an appreciation for the world around me, and I really truly enjoy kind of peace and quiet, but I
yeah,
think a sense of real responsibility that was ingrained at a young age of kind of care and looking after
yeah.
others or other things. Um,
There's
yeah,
there's some really like a core tenet of purpose is it's about serving something beyond your own self-interest. And there's some really great work done by Professor William Damon at Stanford University around youth and purpose and adolescence and purpose. And the core message from his work is, how do you and where do you help young people find a sense of service? Because all too often nowadays, it isn't about what am I bringing to others, it's about what is the world bringing to me and how am I meeting the expectations of the world. So there's something really wonderful in what you're describing here, which is, my responsibility wasn't just to other people, it was other beings.
mm-mm.
And there was something about, there wasn't a choice here, you just got on and did it. But actually the sense of responsibility that came from that was beyond yourself,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's been something that has sat with you continually.
I think so, James, and I think the people that I was surrounded by in terms of my family, most of my family all work for themselves in one way,
Yeah,
shape, or form, and are kind of like found their own way, and actually what they do, they all do different things, but actually the thing that links most of them is they work in an environment which is a service to others.
yes,
So again, I think I was influenced by, how can we kind of enable, support, kind of give, provide
yeah,
to kind of other people around you, make life better for other people, make life
yeah,
easier for other people, provide
yeah,
a really great quality product or a great quality service. And so,
yeah,
I think I was surrounded by that, and that, undoubtedly kind of shaped my sense of what was important in life and
yeah,
what sort of person I think I wanted to be.
yeah. And so what was that moment of disruption like then, where that all of that kind of rich experience, which feels at one end of a spectrum, then came to meet a whole bunch of other experiences, and you're saying it didn't prepare me, as great as that was, we're talking about it, oh wow, look how
Yeah,
great it is to have service to others, wallop.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Those moments of transition in your life. when I reflect back on paper, I probably shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I probably shouldn't be where I am in life. If you were just
Yeah.
looking at kind of me on paper, I wasn't a particularly academic kid. I
Yeah.
struggled at school.
Yeah.
With various, it's brilliant nowadays that there's so much more care and attention paid to different learning needs.
Yes.
And there just wasn't, when I was at school. I had some amazing teachers that did their very best, but the service wasn't there in terms of being able to support someone who had a profound difficulty with spelling,
Yeah.
dyslexia,
Yeah.
struggled to be able to retain, big amounts of information.
Yeah.
So navigating your way through that and kind of probably feeling a sense of isolation in amongst all of
Yes.
that, because everyone else seemingly kind of got it and kind of
Yeah.
could do it. So but I kind of battled my way through school to point of getting average grades in stuff, and then excelling in a couple of things that I was really passionate and interested by and curious by. And that first moment of leaving home to go to university, I kind of wasn't meant to go to university. It wasn't on the cards.
Yeah.
It was 6 weeks. I went through clearing. It was 6 weeks before the kind of the university term started, and and I remember a conversation with my parents that I'd applied to go and study performing arts and psychology, and I only did that because my best friend at the time filled out my UCAS form for me and kind of made me apply. So, like, when my parents then kind of were like, "What on earth are you going to do with that?"
Yeah.
Because going to university wasn't something many people in our family had ever done. In fact, there was only
Yeah.
one person in our entire family that had ever been to university. And then me, like I suspect most people at the age of 18, going, well, I don't know. But actually, I still remember the first thing I said was teacher,
Oh wow.
teacher.
Yeah.
And I think that had come from just going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier. I had taught people how to ride horses from a very young age.
Yeah.
I had found as much passion with teaching people how to accomplish uh, horsemanship, equestrianism, as much as I did competing in it.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that at the time, but I reflect back and kind of think, wow, that was a really important moment. And I think that kind of bled through to what could I become? Well, I kind of
Yeah.
enjoy helping people, so teacher
Yeah.
seems like an obvious.
And again, Sam, there are two things for me in this. The first one is I just resonate so deeply with your educational experience. Being a fellow dyslexic in a
Yeah,
time
yeah,
where
yeah,
that wasn't kind of a diagnosed thing, and being pretty mediocre at most things, but excelling at a couple of things that I really liked, and kind of played to more the skills of a dyslexic individual. And it's certainly something I now have come to value as a superpower, actually, because it's a completely different worldview. But it stands apart, so far apart from the way in which the world wants you to see things, and so that can be really like a really, really jarring experience. So I fully relate to that experience. But there's also something really magical here for our listeners who are constantly wrestling with this idea of working back and connecting the dots, because these are the things that really shape sense of purpose for us. And already you're peeling the onion, in that there was a part of just kind of family life and experience where it was, we serve, there's responsibility to other things beyond us. But then also within that, it wasn't just about, okay, helping didn't just come to the surface because of that sense of responsibility. Actually, you had experiences where the transfer of knowledge, the ability to see other people grow and learn, was within your gift, was within your experience. And it's interesting now to go, well, 1 + 1 = 2, which is math us dyslexics can do, right? So, oh, I can help people teach horse riding. I can teach.
yeah,
Yes, let's do
yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
simple.
yeah,
But there's a
yeah.
part of it which is coming from a really intuitively meaningful place.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And at the time, you wouldn't have been able to have made that connection or drawn the dots, but with the benefit of kind of age, wisdom, and experience, and doing the work, quite
Yeah,
frankly, doing the
yeah,
work on it, you can see the trail of breadcrumbs that kind of leads to the here and now. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, it's my parents asked me that question, what are you going to do? Teach? And then them kind of going, but so I did 3 A levels. I did psychology, performing arts, and sport, and I just picked the 3 subjects I really enjoyed. Like, just
Yeah.
was fascinated, and kind of loved all 3. And so my mum and dad went, have you thought about doing sport, like a sports science? Because I think maybe in their mind, science was a more credible
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
degree, which I can see. And not really knowing, I kind of listened to them, and that's what you do, and you sort of take a steer in a direction from them. And I ended up switching at the very last minute and doing a sports science degree. But even in that experience, I found myself hugely drawn towards the modules of psychology and coaching, and I kind of
Yeah.
dismissed nutrition and
Yeah.
biomechanics and
Anatomy and
all the
physiology.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. They kind of paled into the background. What I was really focused on was, I'm fascinated about how different people learn.
Yeah.
Really interested about how you get inside the minds of other people about what's happening for them, and how you can influence other people, and how you can support and help other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of was the beginning of then, I guess, the years that followed in terms of a career.
Yeah. Amazing. And you mentioned that kind of that critical word of transition a moment ago. There are just these key moments of transition in all of our lives, that kind of feel like pivotal moments. Do you have one of those that felt like, as you were experiencing it, you were kind of like, oh wow, I can't now unsee that. The world is never going to be the same again after it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's often the moments that are, sadly, kind of in life, um, either tinged with, for me personally, either tinged with kind of trauma, or
Yeah.
like overwhelming optimism, and it's almost like these 2 extremes of emotion that really stay with you, that I think kind of imprint on you, and
Yeah.
affect and influence the way you think about yourself and the way you think about the world. Um, and so I can think of both really positive kind of moments, and I can think of, at the time, what were pretty horrific moments,
Yeah.
um, that kind of stay with you, and as I said, and shape you. If I stayed with the kind of maybe more positive experience, a bit like school, I kind of struggled at university, and it didn't really feel, it was fine. Like, I met some nice people, we had a good time. You did a lot of growing up at uni, right? The course was, elements of it were really interesting. Others I've, totally kind of forgotten about. It's
Yeah.
like another existence, another world. But I remember we did a my degree was 4 years, and in the third year you had to take a year out. You had to go and get what they called industry experience. And I'm so grateful. I remember at the time thinking, why am I doing this? I just want to get this degree kind of finished. And there was other people who were mature students that kind of could leapfrog that, because they'd
Yeah.
been working and come back into education. And I so wanted to be in their shoes. So I ended up, going out and getting a job, and you had to go through this, process of applying for these kind of, what felt like on the surface just meaningless jobs. It was just a sort of a tick in the box to kind of, go and say you've done some work and then come back and do 4th year. So I sort of walked into it rather begrudgingly, and perhaps in a negative mindset. And do you know what? That year of working, and I worked for the British Equestrian Federation, national governing body of equestrian sport, because that was still my sport, so I felt a
Yeah.
connection
Yeah.
there. And I had the most wonderful boss, who I think in some ways taught me so much about leadership in such a short space of time, and I'm so eternally grateful. And it was one of the most profound years that really challenged and changed and grew my outlook on what was possible in
Yeah.
life. Because I found, James, for the first time, I found myself being really quite good at something.
Yeah.
which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
I found work easy. I found navigating new relationships with people easy. I
Yeah.
found kind of influencing other people easy. I
Mm.
found the work really interesting. I felt proud of what I was doing. I felt like I was having an impact.
Yeah.
And I felt a real sense of loyalty to the organisation and the cause. Um, and so that first proper working experience, a real job beyond earning pocket money, really shaped, I think, my views on kind of what great leadership can look like in an organisation, and how to navigate the kind of the ups and downs of organisational life, and the relationships that you have to cultivate in order to be able to kind of get stuff done,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the collaboration that you need to be able to drive in order to make things happen. And for some reason that came really naturally to me. I didn't feel like it was something I had to necessarily learn. It was
Yeah.
instinctive.
Yes. Yeah.
um, and I quickly realized I was getting results quite quickly. So it was then consolidating. I was like, wow, I'm fairly good at kind of being a good employee.
Yeah.
And
And again, Sam, there are two things that really draw me into this. You talked about your boss, and actually what they were able to instill in you in a really short space of time. And I'd love to know a little bit about what that was, what your experience was, but more importantly, what you felt in those experiences that kind of transferred that kind of knowledge so quickly. And then the second thing um, was what you were just starting to share there about the kind of the connection to intuition, which is there's this increased level of awareness of, hey, hold on, I can do this, and it's not
mm,
hard. Like
mm,
everything I've ever done like this, like from an education perspective, hard effort. This doesn't require it. And look, ooh, outcomes. I can get the outcomes as well. Easy and outcomes. Is this a real thing? Like, am I cheating? But there's something in that connection, isn't there? Of I'm becoming aware of the experiences that I'm having in the moment, and being able to connect with that feeling. And what I mean by the connection is not just the kind of the bodily awareness, but connecting it to outcome too. Going, maybe I should trust this,
yeah,
and the
yeah,
power of that. So there's something about the leadership, and there's something about trusting your intuition.
yeah. And I kind of intuition has been my companion
Yeah,
throughout life. Um, and in the I guess the toughest moments of kind of decision making or navigating um, challenges, it's what I go to. And I've learned it's served me well. And that's not to say that you kind of dismiss information, data, evidence.
yeah,
You don't dismiss that, but I've always trusted my intuition around, more so around people,
yeah,
around people. Um, can I trust you? Um, do you display the kind of behaviors that enable me to trust you? Do I get that kind of good, warm, fuzzy feeling of kind of,
yeah,
being around you? Is there something just a bit off that, I need to investigate? And as I've kind of grown and lived a bit longer and learnt more about myself, I also appreciate that one of my uh, one of the things I have to be careful of is not to jump to conclusions too quickly
yeah,
about people, not to prejudge.
yeah,
And so I have to work quite hard at that because my intuition works very quickly.
yeah,
And at times I have to kind of go, I'm noticing that, and I'm going to choose just to park it. Doesn't mean that I'm discounting it. I'm just going to pop it over to one side, and I'm going to do a bit more investigating
yeah,
before I
yeah,
draw before I draw a conclusion. And that's so important in the work that you and I do, working with people and developing people. Um, but that's been a constant companion, kind of with me, and that again comes from some of the dynamics I was navigating as a young person, kind of in our family and in our extended family and growing up, in that there was some challenging moments, like many families, and
Yeah.
some difficult relationships and some not so good behaviour. Um,
Yeah.
so kind of learning how to navigate that has been uh, has helped me, I think, in terms of navigating other relationships. But your question, I'm probably veering off track. I think your question was what were like some of the
Well, yeah.
qualities
So
that
interestingly, you talked there about the kind of some of the challenging experiences in that kind of family dynamic, and how that had shaped some of your intuitive experience. But I'm wondering if the exact same is true, but from an opposite perspective, with the kind of the leadership experience that you said that you had, in terms of
mm,
what they were able to teach you in such a short space of time, and the legacy that that then created in you. I'm wondering if there's the flip almost.
yeah, yeah, possibly. I hadn't thought about that until you said it. I think, yeah, I think what, when I think about this person, I haven't thought about them for a long time because it was a long time ago. But an individual with no ego, a sense of kind of doing what's right,
Yeah.
regardless of the impact on them, a care for people, a genuine
Yeah.
care for people, a sense of high standards,
Hmm.
and an unwavering kind of but kind of kind approach to high standards.
Yeah.
Someone who just inspired you to want to be your very best and wouldn't want, for me, it was about, I don't want to let this person down
Yeah.
because they've entrusted me so much. Her ability to be able to kind of give you freedom to do your thing, to act, to take risks, to make decisions, but know that they were always kind of there in the background, ready to step in or support if you made a mistake or a misjudgment, or an error. Um, and and that kind of just gave me license to kind of experiment within an organization, and know that I had kind of cover, but a sense of real what's the word I'm looking for, belief, a sense of
Yeah.
belief in me, and that was like, wow, maybe I am good at some stuff, and maybe I can do this. And that, to your point, all of our experiences, to some degree, perhaps less so in terms of competing, teaching other people, I was, felt fairly comfortable and confident in my ability to do that. But certainly, kind of from an academic schooling perspective, I was never brilliant at anything. There was always other people better than me. Uh, but
What
so yeah.
what strikes me, Sam, is when you're describing this person, that you didn't go to capability at all. I mean, they must have had exceptional capability if they're the leader of the organization, but
Mm-mm.
the things that have created a legacy are the things that they cultivated emotionally in you. There's a trust, a belief. There was a sense of freedom. There was a sense of care, and then there was almost like the emerging values for you, or the things that have always been values, but certainly a kind of an emerging awareness to them in terms of, well, excellence is important, but there's a way to achieve it.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
it's not just about the standard you set; it's how you bring people to that standard that's really critical. And I draw attention to that because it feels like there will be many people who are when they think about what good looks like in the world around them, often it's about the things that people do rather than who they really are. And sometimes it's important just to be able to call out a distinction, that the legacy that we create is often about who we are rather than what we've done. But all the time we lead with what we do.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
it feels disconnected to some degree.
yeah. I completely agree with you. And for me, it was all about who that person was,
Yeah.
and I think about the people I choose to work with now. I think about the people I've worked with in the past, and it for me, the most important thing is who you are
Yeah.
and what you bring, and connection with people, particularly through the lens of leadership, should be emotional, in my view. It
Yeah.
is emotional. You're trying to work together to achieve something, and if you're passionate about that and you want to do a good job, emotion is just part and parcel of it. It's kind of
Yeah.
with you on the journey,
Yeah.
and trying to close down emotional reactions, responses in relationships to others, because necessarily we are in a relationship,
Yeah.
whether or not we like it or not, is kind of you're missing something for me.
Yeah.
You're kind of stifling the potential for one person to positively impact and influence another, and vice versa,
Yeah.
and be able to achieve something together. Often where you don't think it's possible to achieve something as well. For
Yeah.
me, it's the extra ingredient that kind of sets people apart, in terms of what they accomplish, and
For
and
sure.
more importantly, how they go about accomplishing that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and you spoke to that in terms of I don't want to let this person down. That's
Yeah.
a deep level of intrinsic motivation, isn't it? And we can talk about the shadow side of that too, because you can overplay some stuff. But I'm wondering, because this feels like a really useful moment to maybe just kind of pivot from this kind of uncovering sense of purpose experience into kind of more the understanding element of it, because you're drawing us into emotion and the criticality and the significance of emotion and relationship. And one of the most important relationships we have is with ourselves, and often it can be undercultivated. And the whole nature of purpose for me around understanding is about self-worth. It's about knowing that we're enough, because if we know what is meaningful, is significant, and we're able to make a contribution to the things that really matter, then we feel valued. We feel like we have worth, and we're enough, and we determine that, we decide that. So I'm really interested from your perspective, what are the strongest influences on your sense of self-worth nowadays, and how did you become aware of them?
It's a big question. um, I, I think in some ways it's a sort of it's a combination of everything you ever experience in life that gets you to this kind of point, and it's never a journey that's complete, right?
Yeah.
We're still experiencing new things, and we're still finding out stuff about ourselves, and we're evolving, and we're kind of challenging our own perceptions of ourselves. um, I think I've been really privileged and lucky to be, for the majority of my kind of working life, in a learning environment constantly,
Hmm.
and kind of exposed to so many different people with different outlooks and different experiences. And I think that's, I've kind of had like 20 years of almost being in informal education about learning about people, and with that, therefore having to learn about myself, because the
Yeah.
work starts, as you described, James, like starts with you, and being in knowing, kind of knowing what works for you, knowing what motivates you, knowing what demotivates you, knowing what challenges you, knowing what upsets you.
Yeah.
And so I think there's been moments where I've had to then kind of do quite a substantial amount of soul searching, around what's going on for me. And I've been lucky enough to have those moments kind of in my life to be able to explore what that is.
And what did that look like for you, Sam? Just for a moment, think about being somebody in their car or going out for a run right now, and just going, okay, I feel the tension there, or I'm experiencing the tension. What's the experience of soul searching? What was that like for you? What
Yeah,
were the things that you were searching around in and at and for?
I think, being curious about how I respond well in some instances and to some people, and also being curious about why I respond in a not so good way with some people in some instances, and wondering what that's all about. So there was a
Yeah.
genuine kind of curiosity about noticing my own behavior. you
Yeah.
know when I'm under pressure, and I become a bit belligerent, and I become difficult. Why
Yeah.
am I becoming difficult?
Yeah.
And so I guess from like early 20s, I got really interested around this notion of personal values, and the values that shape and drive, and how do they get formed, and where is that shape from, and why are they with me, and can I change them, and do I
Yeah.
want to change them, and will they change, and almost then getting a bit frustrated that like I think for many of us, we might put down an idealistic set of kind of words that we
Yeah.
think describes us, but actually, to my point earlier, it's the extremities of experience, it's the extremities of emotion that I think lay the foundations of those core values in us.
Yeah.
And I think I've spent a long time thinking about that, and I've spent a long time reflecting on that, and I think about, excuse my language, I think about what really pisses me off. What's the behavior in others that really, I call it my fizzy bottle moment.
Yeah.
What's that physiological response where I'm having to work really hard to keep the lid on, and in the
Yeah.
past, because I didn't have a sense of myself fully or well enough, the fizzy bottle lid would explode, and I would
Yeah.
have an incredibly emotional reaction to things. And as a child, I was incredibly volatile,
Mm.
emotionally volatile. I would really lose my temper, and people describe that kind of red mist. I can relate to that as a youngster. I used to turn my room inside out and back to front, with rage, or then genuine upset if I felt like I'd let someone down or let something
Yeah.
down. And that those extremities really kind of shape your values and what's important to you. And so I think doing the work, being prepared to do the work on yourself, and being in environments, which is why I mentioned I feel like I've been gifted throughout my career a kind of a learning environment to explore that and experiment
Yeah.
with that. So finding out what you really stand for, and what you kind of what you go to in terms of your core, what is your
Yeah.
guide, what is your framework for making decisions.
Yeah.
I think that's really important, and I see people paying lip service to that, and not
Mm.
and not doing the work. And I just find it helps me in so many parts of my life now, in all facets of day to day, relationship, family, friends, work. Um, and the question I ask myself is this about me, or is this about the other person?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
Um,
interesting you talk about, turning your room upside down, and, this kind of fizzy bottle moment. And, for our listeners, I've got a wry smile here when you say, can I, sorry, excuse the language, and then said, pisses me off, because some of our guests have gone a little bit more fragrantly than that. But that's how I experience you, Sam. Calm and considered, and soulful and playful. And so the very idea that there's a red mist rage history in you, I'm like, yes, where does
yeah,
that
yeah,
come from? Like,
yeah, yeah,
how did
yeah,
that
yeah,
happen? But,
yeah, yeah,
but it's almost an evidence base that, I've known you for over 10 years, and that doesn't seem true to me, yet it's part of, who you are and how you've tried to understand yourself and thought about what is my relationship with the world. And if people want this most simple definition of purpose, for me, it's about, our relationship with the world, because it has two components. It has you, and it has
yeah,
the world, and the
yeah, yeah,
connection
yeah,
between
yeah, yeah,
those two things. um,
yeah,
and so, this idea of kind of being able to understand and create a foundation of self-worth that comes from the inside out. You're really doing a beautiful job of being able to articulate the importance of those kind of founding ideals, the kind of the values lived into virtues, and being able to see and spend time in different situations and circumstances that provoke different responses from those things, so that that you can rely upon them. There's a level of consistency there for you, I guess, is what I'm hearing, that then enables the extreme edges to kind of feel a little bit more within your control and influence, which is one of the powers of the outcome of a sense of purpose, is that kind of feeling of control. Where have you unleashed it? Where have you unleashed those things? Like, where have been the moments of courage, within work or within your personal life, where you have just had this faith and belief in something that was possible, that required you to go to a place of emotional conviction and courage to go after it? Yeah. Where have you unleashed it?
um, oh wow. I guess the most obvious example of that, James, was in 2013 when, probably at the height of when we were working together. And on paper, I had a really, I had a great life. I was about to say I had a really great role, but actually more than that, kind of life was pretty pucker. I'm in my late 20s. I'm living in London. Never thought I would do that.
Yeah.
My
Hey,
first,
farm boy, scared of the
yeah,
city.
right. My first visit to London on a school trip at the age of 16 or 17, and I was scared to death. I thought, how
Yeah.
on earth do people live here? And I never want to come back. That was my overriding kind of feeling at that time. And lo and behold, I find myself moving on to live in London and working for UK Sport, and just having the most incredible learning journey. I mean, it was steep and so rewarding and so fulfilling at a time where we were gearing up for home games,
Yeah.
Olympics and Paralympics, in my back garden, because I lived on the edge of the Olympic Park in Stratford, and I had 6 brilliant years that were, again, kind of life shaping. And I could have just carried on. And off the buzz of London, and all of our collective work being successful and doing what no host nation had ever done. And it was like, right, roll on Rio. Let's
Yeah.
do more of it. Let's do more of the work that we've done in supporting coaches and developing coaches and learning from other industries and bringing that into our world, and developing a really strong system for this success to continue. And I'd reached a point where I just felt I was repeating the same experience, and
Yeah.
it felt, the way I can describe it, it felt like I was treading water, and I'd stopped growing. I'd stopped learning. And I think on reflection, perhaps because I'd had that 5 to 6 years where every day was about learning. And then there was this sort of period where I was like, suddenly it didn't feel like that anymore. It
Yeah.
felt quite extreme, the sense of inertia.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, well, this can't be me for the next 10 years. I'm not very good with routine. I like doing things differently. I don't like repeating experiences. I need to kind of challenge myself, because I've stood up in front of people who are just brilliant people at what they do, and talked about the importance of learning from other places and other people, and
Yeah.
taking yourself out of your comfort zone. And lo and behold, I was kind of in my comfort zone, and I thought,
Yeah.
well, bollocks, I can't continue to operate with integrity. I have to kind of take a dose of my own medicine, and therefore, what is going to take me out of my comfort zone? And that meant leaving. That meant moving on. And I didn't really know what that was. I knew I didn't want to work in a big organization where I would just be eaten up by a machine and be one of many. I knew I wanted to learn from a different world, so not necessarily sport, because
Yeah.
that had been my career and that had been my experience. So I kind of recognized that there was a bigger world out there. And I knew I needed something that was really going to challenge me and make me feel a bit uncomfortable. And long story short, through a conversation with John Steele, who was the chief exec at UK Sport when I first joined, and was someone who I kind of shared an instant connection with in the time that he was the chief exec. We just had a conversation, and the conversation sparked an idea, and that idea was the formation of Unforgiving Minute, our business, which is now in our 10th year.
That's amazing.
And that was a leap of faith. And I, we started from nothing, absolutely nothing. We shook hands on what we wanted the business to do, and we said, let's just give it a go and see what happens. And I handed my notice in with 3 months. I had no idea how I was going to pay my rent for the first month. I managed to save a bit of money to kind of get me through for the first 6 weeks, and therefore that was like a lighter to a flame, in terms of, you've got to make something happen. Like, you can't you can't just wait for someone to kind of put something in your lap, or for someone to offer you something. Like, you are now the master of your own destiny, and unless you make it happen, then this ain't going to work.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you go back to working for an organization, and so we made it work. And it was tough, and I remember being apprehensive about making that call. And I remember a great conversation with a kind of a colleague who we brought in to do different work. She was a great coach, great mentor. And I remember she said to me, Sam, if you don't believe in yourself, how do you expect other people to believe in what you can offer? And it just hit me between the eyes. And I thought, you're right. If I'm not even going to back myself in terms of making this successful,
Yeah.
working along someone like John, who, huge amount of kind of credibility and experience in the space of leadership, you're never going to make it work. So just go for it, and figure it out as you go, and take responsibility. And that, I think, I was lucky enough that sense of responsibility and accountability came very easily to me,
Yeah.
because of, I think, in some ways, the environment in which I'd grown up in, with the majority of my family kind of ploughing their own furrow, making
Yeah.
their own way, and seeing the ups and downs of that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of coping with those setbacks. There were definite moments early on where I didn't know how I was going to pay my rent, and there I was like days away from having to go to my parents and ask them for money, something I'd never done, which I felt
Yeah.
incredibly uncomfortable at doing at the age of 28. Thankfully, I didn't have to. But there have been those moments. And so, yeah, leap of faith around moving from a really, really brilliant environment, a great organization, a great cause, something I felt very passionate about, a job that I'd got established in, and had built some credibility, I think, with the
Yeah.
with the people
For
in the
sure.
system that we worked with. And it would have been really easy for me to just stay in that system, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough.
And so there was a second element of what you were sharing there, Sam, as well, which closes the loop, and this idea of responsibility, and that idea that if I can't make this work now with this person, I'm never going to be able to make this work. I've got to take this on, which was, kind of responsibility to yourself and to John, and was almost fed by, I was 2 days away from maybe potentially having to ask my parents for money, and that's the last thing I needed to do. I've got to deal with this. So there's
Yeah.
there's just something really magical about the way in which you're closing the loop of this really, really critical moment of leap of faith. But actually, what was driving that was the same stuff that was formed in you in that period of uncovery and connecting the dots.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it's a great kind of playback, James, actually, of our conversation, and connecting some of the things that we've talked about throughout. Um,
But
yeah.
just to put you on the spot a little bit, Sam, that leap of faith was really a kind of a professional moment. Obviously, has huge kind of personal knock-on effects. But
Mm, mm.
I'm wondering if there are leaps of faith where you've kind of really had to have those moments of courage from a personal perspective, too.
Yeah, yeah. There's sort of several, really. I notice, I what works for me is when I say things out loud, I then feel a sense of commitment about having to follow through with them, because like other people know it's not just in my head. So like, you know, so like when I say I'm going to take a big chunk of time off, I'm not going to work, and I'm going to go traveling, I'm going to do it on my own. Um, and then the words leave your mouth and go, oh, okay, I've said it, so therefore people now ask me questions about when I'm doing it, and
Yeah.
how I'm getting on with planning that trip. So I had to follow through with it. And it, it's interesting. It doesn't come from necessarily a desire to want to um, travel. Um, it it comes more from a place of, I wonder how I'd get on doing this on my own.
Yeah.
And I wonder how I would respond to this opportunity for travel,
immersing myself in completely different environments, and as far away from that kind of protected
Yeah.
um, uh, world that I grew up in for kind of 18 years.
Yeah.
I'm traveling South America, and I'm kind of doing it on my own, and I don't single myself out as doing anything special. Lots of people do that. Um, but the drive came from, I wonder how I'll respond. I wonder how I'll get on.
Yeah.
And I kind of notice I do that quite a lot in situations. I have a curiosity about myself,
Yeah.
almost as if I'm outside looking at myself going, go on then, see how you get on, see what you learn from
Yes.
that. Does that
Yeah.
tell you something else about yourself? And a similar experience was when I chose to kind of up sticks from London and move to Brighton. Didn't need to do that. Wasn't a compelling reason about a work opportunity, or lifestyle particularly, or a relationship. It was, I've lived in London for 6 years. I feel like I've got a bit complacent and a bit
Yeah.
comfortable. I
Yeah.
wonder what it would be like to live somewhere else. And I'm
Yeah.
curious about how I might respond in that moment to that
Yeah.
opportunity. And you know what? I guess I have this sense of perspective on life, which is, if it doesn't go right, or if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
because to a greater or lesser degree, we have an opportunity to be able to then change it.
Yeah.
Nothing's set, nothing's stuck. You can if the business didn't work and it didn't take off, or it wasn't what we thought, well, just go and get a job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it might be tough to get a job, and it might be difficult, and I might have to compromise on stuff, but so be it. And I think that's quite interesting, around when you think about kind of aligning behind a sense of purpose, and holding true to yourself about what you're trying to achieve. I think being patient with that's really important.
Yes.
And I think there has to be a degree of kind of compromise, that perhaps in the short term it will feel a bit uncomfortable, and it won't be idealistic, and there'll be some stuff that you'll have to give up.
Yeah.
But I think if you're clear about why you're doing it, and what it is that you're trying to move towards
Yes.
in the long term, then I think it's worth sticking with it,
Yeah.
despite how challenging it might be for a short period of time. And I definitely, can relate to that from a developing and growing our organization, our business, but I can relate to that from a personal perspective as well. So maybe that just puts a different lens on it.
And I don't want to ask you any more questions, Sam. I think you've just landed on a really brilliant moment for us to kind of pause this conversation, which is, you know, there is a word that's been really consistent throughout this conversation, which has been curiosity. And um, curiosity for me feels beyond just a desire to learn and grow. It feels like there's an activism behind it. And I love the question you ask yourself, like, how am I going to respond? I don't know.
Yeah,
Let's go and try it out.
yeah,
Um, and it feels like, in addition to responsibility, like that's a really critical founding ideal of yours, that the kind of the curious nature that you have in the world. And it's easy for some people to say, but where your choices have kind of embodied that. But something's just emerged at the end, which I think is a leveler for all of us, and something that we all need to hear, which is patience. Patience. If it really matters and you really value it, and it is going to deliver you in the direction that you know is critical, you don't know what the path is going to be. It's not set out in front of you.
yeah,
You don't know
yeah,
what the key moments of the journey are going to be. So be patient with yourself and stay the course. And that, for me, feels like an overwhelmingly powerful message to invest in purpose, because it can just help us stay the course.
yeah.
So Sam, thank you. Like, just wonderful to have this time to explore your journey, and for you to be able to share your wisdom of experience. Thank you.
Thanks for giving me the time and the space. It's seldom, in the work that we do, to kind of take stock and have the opportunity to kind of talk out your experiences. So I appreciate the opportunity and the brilliant questions, James. There'll be stuff that I will be taking away to reflect on.
Amazing. Have a wonderful, wonderful time, everybody. We look forward to being with you next time on The Excitable Soul. Massive thank you for taking the time to listen to the Excitable Soul podcast. If you are interested in uncovering, understanding, and unleashing your sense of purpose, come and explore our purpose immersion programs at theexcitablesoul.com. We look forward to hearing from you there or being with you on our next episode. Have an incredible day.